Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Hypnovision Studios. Today, I got a very special request to dive into signs and symbolism. And that would also include synchronicity, by the way. So, to be honest with you guys, I actually had ChatGTP to help write me a script for YouTube, but I'm throwing it out the window because there's really only one way to learn about signs and synchronicities, and that is through self-discernment. And to be honest, that is what the request was, how to read them for yourself. So guys, this is going to be my attempt to at least show how I have been able to connect a lot of dots that other people simply could not see. And I will give you a few examples, and I will share some symbolism with you as I go along. And as you can see behind me, I have a graphic on the screen, and we will discuss some other things like repeating numbers and patterns and different things that can often repeat themselves as a synchronistic event. Speaking of repeating numbers, sometimes you might see those show up on license plates, like 666s, 444s, 222s, different things like that. And if you look at the chart behind me, all repeating numbers equal 3, 6, and 9. The sum total always equals back to 3, 6, and 9. And if you want to be honest, number 9 is a power number. So if you start to multiply any number by 9, you will always come back to the same result. And that is very interesting. That also tells us that numbers are absolute. And that also tells us that words can lie. It is often said that numbers is the Creator's divine language. And when you start to dig into Hebrew itself and the history behind that, you start to understand on a very basic fundamental level what symbolism really is all about. It is the human language that is natural in so many ways. So as I start to dig into some of this stuff, because I'm doing this somewhat impromptu, I hope I don't start to jump around too much because, like I said, I am totally throwing out my script today and I am going totally off the cuff. The whole thing with Hebrew language, if you start to look at it on a very deep level, the way the symbols are designed or shaped or turned is a direction of energy. And when you start to understand on a deeper level that emotions in their truest form is energy, it is a vibration, a feeling. And when you understand the word feeling, right, we have to go back to human language in this entirety. Because on the one hand, if numbers are truly the absolute language and you have the human spoken language, then you start to see the fallacies and the words that are spelled differently, but the sound that comes off of them, the way it rolls off the tongue, really does matter. Again, the whole idea of the word knife having the hidden K in it, and it's knife if you say it how it's spelled. So if you start to understand the difference in what is man-made and what is nature or natural, then you will start to get a fundamental grasp of symbolism and science itself. Now, I myself I am a fan of Neville Goddard, and he often says that the signs follow, they never precede. And I've pondered on this for a while. Why would he say that? Well, for one thing, your dominant thoughts are vibrating out into the universe, and then it has to be reflected back to you. So that, my friends, is why he would say that the signs always follow. They never precede. Because first, it has to come from the human mind and be broadcast out and reflected. That is why it is following, never preceding. So sometimes, if you start to see a repeating pattern in a certain way and you start to really pay attention to it, and maybe it's like, okay, well, if I see 555, then I need to, maybe I should Google it. Maybe I should look into what is the meaning. I've seen it 3 times now. I'll give you a good example, and I'll have to draw this out on a piece of paper as I go. But a couple years ago, I opened up Facebook Messenger. And if you're familiar with the app, then you know at the top it shows when people are active. Well, that particular day, when I opened up Facebook Messenger, every single person up there, it said 38 minutes ago. Well, I thought that was strange, and I looked at it, and it was up there 5 times. So I saw the number 38 flash 5 times. And so naturally, I went and looked up what is the meaning of seeing repeating numbers of 38. That led me to understand the Ascended Masters. This page that it took me to was telling me about all the different deities. You have Buddha, you have Jesus, you have Krishna in Hindu, and then the Chinese. So all these different Taoism was another one. So all these different religions that are all over the world in different cultures, and you start to see the patterns in these, right? Because they may be a different culture, a different religion. There may be slight differences in beliefs, but when you start to get down into the nitty gritty of it, all of them have a major theme that is in common. There is some form of Trinity, and that is 3. Again, if you want to understand the keys to the universe, 3, 6, and 9. So Nikola Tesla is perhaps one of the most well-known inventors, and he was often criticized for speaking about God and his communication with God. But did you know that the pineal gland is full of tiny microcrystals, and they are piezoelectric, which means when they vibrate, they release energy. Here's something else that's very interesting about the word crystal. When we start to think about pronunciation and how things roll off the tongue, the word crystal and the word Christ all, as in Jesus Christ, it is spelled different. Christ all, or Christ, Christ, all, crystal, all is more like all, O-I-L-L, all. Well, guess what? We have an all that travels up and down our spinal cord. It's called the chrism. And we also have the crystals that are in our pineal gland. So you can start to see, when you start peeling back the layers of religion itself and religious institutions, and how sometimes stories get passed down and little tweaks along these storylines can really change the end result. And when you get many generations down the bloodlines, the true meaning is truly lost. But those who have gate kept the information, they know the truth. So I find that very interesting. Nikola Tesla was also known for his inventions with the wireless energy experiments, which nowadays we have wireless phones. We have wireless TV that can transmit to our phones, wireless satellite. There's all kinds of communications going on in the air all through this room right now as I speak, and wherever you are, there's signals being sent everywhere. And if you break the word signal down, sigil, which if you look into the esoteric teachings, then you understand that sigils often are related back to magic. Well, why is that? Well, magic really, honestly and truly comes from the imagination. The word magi is contained inside of the word imagination. The very first letter of imagination is I. I, magic. So when you go and look up the word magi, you come to understand the 3 kings. This is the story of Jesus. These 3 kings were looking for the northern star. Why 3? 3 is such a powerful number when you start to look into the mysteries of the universe itself. And I found that very interesting. Just like the crystal concept with the pineal gland, the last name of Christ. And if you go back into mythology itself and you look into the history of language, you understand that the letter J is only around 700 to 800 years old. It didn't exist before then. So you also understand that Zeus, through Greek mythology, was known for thunder and lightning. Well, as it turns out, Jesus, if you say Jesus, or if you say Christ, Christ all, the lightning, the impulses that happen through the pineal gland. That is very interesting. So how do I decipher things for myself? Well, first, you really got to understand a few basic things. And then once you start to get a grasp of that, you can start to really learn how to read them for yourself. And as I get to go into this, there's one thing I want to point out. I am not a huge, as you say, a Bible thumper. There are a few key verses from the Bible that I hold near and dear for myself. One of those is indeed Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the patterns of the outside world. Why does it say patterns? That is very interesting. The next part of that is, do not conform to the patterns of the outside world, but be renewed by transforming the mind. Transforming the mind. And then you can test the theory to see if it's good and pleasing to God. Now that is very interesting, because what is on the outside world? Well, first, we have to acknowledge the very simple fact that my first person view is internal. So anything on the outside of me, this notebook, this pen, this microphone, anything out here, including a Bible, is on the outside of me. So it takes personal discernment to understand what the Bible is trying to tell you, because two people will not get the same meaning, and they can discuss and go back and forth and try to interpret and come to some kind of accordance or agreement that, yes, we agree that it means X, Y, or Z. But again, at the end of the day, it's each individual person that has to come to their own discernment. And so for me, Romans 12:2 is a very powerful verse to remember, because in the beginning days, when I started to repeat it to myself often, I would often find things that were kind of rubbing me the wrong way, maybe trying to trigger me a little bit. And then I would remind myself, Romans 12:2, do not conform to the patterns of the outside world. So I have, in many ways, in situations like that, finding that detaching my emotional response from the logical side of it, it was the difference in becoming triggered and staying peaceful. So that has been a very big blessing in my own life. And if it helps you out there, then it's worth saying it. So we have to start with the four most basic elements, and that is air, fire, water, and earth. And as you can see, there are four triangles, and air has a line going through about midway with the point going up, and earth is going down. So why do we start with these four as the four basic elements? Well, we need air to breathe, we need water both to drink, and our body is 70 to 80% water. We are made of elements of the earth. That is the other thing. And fire, quite literally, is the impulses, right? So if you ever seen a tree catch on fire from a lightning strike, lightning hit the earth material and it caused a spark which started a fire. So it takes all four of these elements to make up what we call the ether. And that is the consciousness of things, because it takes all four to create. If you hold your breath and try to pass out, more than likely your body automatically will start breathing again. So at some point, it is intelligence beyond your own control that causes you to breathe again. And same thing for water. If water is 70 to 80% makeup of your body, water is very well at conducting sound. So a lot of sea life, like dolphins and different things, will use sonar because it travels through the water and it is a very good conductor. We also have the fire element, again, which is the electrical impulses. So to really start to break symbolism down and signs and different things, you have to really kind of go back and start peeling back the layers of ancient civilizations, because rudimentally, hieroglyphs, right? Words can be such a shifty thing because of the dilution of sound. Sound itself carries information, just like the air can carry digital forms of communication. So does these other elements. And that is one of the most fundamental things. And in front of me, this is an example of a birth chart. Now, I'm not going to dig deep into how to read a birth chart because, quite honestly, you can go to websites that will help break these things down for you. You can also download an app on your phone, and all you have to do is plug in your information. You really need to know the time of day for one of the things to get a more accurate reading. So you can use these apps to figure out, for example, I have a Capricorn sun and a Pisces moon, and I have an ascendant in Libra. So the other thing is you can find out what your ruling planet is. For example, my ruling planet is Saturn. And I've already done a whole video about the rings of Saturn and the repeating patterns and the black cube. So if you find that kind of stuff interesting, I will try to insert a card. But once you start to understand some of your placements, you have to understand that when it comes to the zodiac signs, you inhabit all 12 of them. You are not just your sun sign. You are not just your moon sign. Each one of these signs are connected to different houses in astrology. And once you start to understand what these houses in astrology are telling you, then you can start to self-reflect, because certain signs have certain strengths and certain weaknesses, and it is like a Rubik's Cube, really. So that takes us back to these crosshairs that are in the center, and which is probably not the most accurate way to read a birth chart. But again, when you start to look at this in a different way, not just as your sun sign or just your moon sign, you start to see how all of these things are really an impression, right? So the day you were born, it depends on where the sun was at, where the moon was at, what were the alignments of the stars. And we are so accurate in being able to know 30, 40 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, where the sun was, where the different planets were. So what does that tell you? If we were moving in space, then you would expect that those would not be in the same locations, right? The Big Dipper and Little Dipper and some of the other constellations would not be in the same location today as they were 15,000 years ago. So what does that tell you about the Earth itself? Our history is mostly fabricated, and our history is mostly taught through repetition without the teaching of the internal self, the intuition inside. Again, that first letter is an I. So self-discernment is really big when it comes to reading symbolism. And as I flip through these, I'm going to include a few stories of some things that I decoded for myself that I found to be extremely interesting. Okay, so here we go. Back to the triangles for a second. As you can see, there's a six-sided star right here, right? The different triangles, when you put them together, you start to form a star. Now, most people will see this and automatically say, oh, that's the Star of David. Now, I'm not here to dispute if it's the Star of David or not. What I will tell you is when you start to look into that star, you start to realize that it is much older than the timeline of David. And there are even some people that will argue that David never even existed. But what I do know is if you look into the chakra systems, and perhaps I will do a whole video on the full chakras one day, but the heart, which is the fourth house in astrology, it deals with family. It deals with home. And home is where the heart is. And in the chakra systems, home is symbolized by the six-pointed star. And it is also green. So this is a great segue for me to lead into a dream that I had. Now, recently I made a post, and I actually did put it on my community board here on YouTube. It was about a dream that I had. And I actually had journaled about this dream because I had several reoccurring dreams about a green eye. I'll put the image on the screen. So 3 different nights, I woke up at 3:33 a.m. and I wrote that the sun was getting brighter inside of me. And numbers are everywhere. 3, 6, and 9 pyramid. That is very interesting because just a few months later, here where I live in town, I saw a sign, an actual sign, and I'm going to show it to you because I think this is kind of cool in retrospect. But when I first saw it, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. I was like, you know, in the world of spirituality and like cracking your third eye and different things like that, some people believe in it, some people don't. But when you have experiences that is hard for you to explain to others around you, it feels supernatural. So I'm going to show you this sign. It literally has a green eye on it. Isn't that something? The perfect sight. So if you ever wanted to know, is it possible to receive messages from the universe? It absolutely is true. Why would I dream about a green eye? Why would I see a sign just a short while later with a green eye on it on a main road in the town that I live in? Guys, is that coincidence or is that a synchronistic event? Am I imagining things or is there something for me to connect there? Because the other thing I learned when I started to have those dreams, the green to me was very symbolic because there's also the aspect of the duality of life. On the one hand, you could look at green as jealousy, envy, wicked witch of the West, right? On the other hand, green, the most of the earth is green, right? Mother Earth, Mother Gaia, the heart chakra is green. So you have this duality aspect of things, right? Hot, cold, up, down. There's always an opposite and equal to everything that exists. You have the 7 deadly sins, and then you have the 7 chakras. You also have 7 hermetic laws. And if you understand that the word hermetic comes from hermetically sealed, your body is hermetically sealed, which means the only thing that goes in the body is through the mouth, the nose, the ears, or any kind of cuts or abrasions on your skin. The body contains the water, all the fluids in the body. So it is separating the waters from the waters. The eyes, right? There's fluid in your eyes, but there's the vapor in the atmosphere. So there is a separation between what is inside and what is outside. The saying, as above, so below, as within, so without, is really true here. Because what you think about goes out into the universe and then it ripples back to you like a sonar, like a radar. And I find these things to be really interesting because, just to give you another example, a few days ago, I made a short reel about hearing a song. I got my mind set on you. When I went and looked at the album cover, it said the album cover name was Cloud 9. The guy's name was up there as George Harrison. So if you hear things like that, for me, for example, that's a song that I probably haven't heard in a very long time. So when I was sitting in a meditation and it kept playing over and over in my head, I was like, well, this isn't a song that I normally listen to, so let me look it up because it's really strange. It's like playing a lot in my head. And, you can look for clues, right? The album cover may be giving you clues. The lyrics in the song may be giving you clues. And how often you are hearing it or how strong the intensity of it might be leading you to some clues that you otherwise would be missing. Again, I said this in my short reel that the best time to hear these things is during meditation, during times when you are able to start to quieten that chatter in the mind. So, when it comes to symbolism, again, guys, it's a lot like hieroglyphs because images contain way more information than written words, right? And speaking of Cloud 9, this is something that I wrote a couple years ago. Path 9, Cloud 9. I give love to people they never had. This is some stuff that I wrote. I am abundant, 333. I am grateful, 333. I have so much money to give, 333. I have wisdom from my lessons, 333. I speak universal language, 333. And I believe it is my time to shine, 333. And I will tell you something else, guys. When it comes to the imagination, it is the image, right? You've heard it before. We are created in God's image. So you will often see me talk about being in the sunlight, getting sun, because it helps the pineal gland. And not only that, it helps your circadian rhythm. And this is something else. When it comes to symbolism, ancient Egypt and different things like that, you might have seen the eye of Horus, right? Let's break this down for just a minute. The word Horus, we derive many things from this. Hours of the day, there's 12 hours of a day. You have typically 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nighttime. So there is a 12-hour cycle that happens every 24 hours. Why does the sun and the pineal gland seem to be so closely tied? Because these cycles of day and night affect our circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm also affects our chemical makeup in our body. That is something very interesting. And when you start to look into ancient cultures and you see the chemics, right? You may have heard this before, the chemics. Chemistry. Well, what is the pineal and the pituitary gland designed for? It releases hormones, eye of Horus. So the hormone makeup in your body is partly regulated by the sun and the moon and the cycles of Earth. The energy that is happening from the different planets that are moving around us affect our bodies. Just like the moon can affect the tides in the ocean, it affects the water and the different chemical makeups in our body. So if we start to learn to self-reflect through different types of meditation or just being still, practicing mindfulness, we will start to notice things that we never saw before. And that is part of the awakening to reading different signs and symbolism for yourself. I oftentimes catch a lot of repeating numbers that are on license plates, different places that, you may not have ever thought twice of before. But once you start to understand and see them for what they are, they do kind of work like guides, because you could be doing something that is leading you in the wrong direction. And the universe could be saying, hey, I'm trying to send you a red flag. You need to stop, right? So the same could be said if you're going in the right direction. There could be confirmations, right? Sometimes there are different animals that show up. I'll give you an example. A cardinal is known as a spirit animal. So sometimes you might see a cardinal. A few years ago, I had lost my grandma, and she was real big on cardinals. And there was, one day I was messing her real bad, and I left to go back to work from lunch. And I got in my truck and got ready to back out the driveway, and sitting right on the fence beside me was a red cardinal. And to me, I took that as a sign like, hey, we are always here. You can always remember me through your imagination and your memories. So we start to understand that the reality of life is partly perception, partly imagination, and as real as the mind can make it be. Because the mind is sitting in complete darkness inside of our skull. It is cut off from the outside world, and it relies on the five senses to help make the picture up. So the mind and the body literally, it cannot tell the difference between what is real and what is not real. For example, if I go into meditation and I start to dominantly think about a state of being, this is a key right here, guys. I'm going to give you a key. It is the state of being, right? The words on this page may not change, but how I feel about these words can. If I'm depressed and I see this and I start to feel a certain way about it, right? However, I can change how I feel even though the words stay the same. So the contrast, the perception, the angle of perception has changed. And this, my friends, is how you start to break yourself free from your old self. This is how you start to break the illusion, break through the veil of self. But when you start to look at ancient civilizations and you start to look at the patterns, the signs, the symbols, and even one of the oldest symbols out there, the six-pointed star. It is one of the oldest symbols there is, guys. So I'm going to show you a few more things here, because that number 38 that I mentioned earlier, if you take 8 plus 3, it equals 11. 11 is a master number. 11 is also known as a twin flame number. Why is it called a twin flame number? Because two ones look the same, right? They are identical. So we have that understanding now, and I'm going to show you something right here. So the number 11, right? You've probably seen this before as a Masonic sign, right? But this is a Tesla coil, a positive and negative, how the current flows between the two. And if you take the symbolism of the lightning bolt here and replace that with the pineal gland, right? And we have the nervous system, and it is symbolized in blue and red. When you understand that positive and negative are two polar opposite poles, and the nervous system works the same way, you have a positive side, you have a negative side of the nervous system. And if you take it back to what I said earlier about duality of life, there is an equal opposite of everything. You can be in a fight or flight, which means part of your nervous system is closed off. There are emotional blockages. It's like a circuit breaker that has tripped, and the energy is not able to flow in a complete circuit through your nervous system. And therefore, essentially, you are in a fight or flight for a long period of time. And that changes your perception and how you see things. What is reality? It doesn't change, right? So again, I'll take the whole idea that the words on the page don't change. The perception and the feeling of how you are seeing the words on the page changes. So by that understanding, we start to understand magnetism, because you can be dominantly polarized to a negative perception of life or positive perception of life. Ideally, you have to understand that there is a up and down flow to life, so you need balance of both. So transmutation is another thing. You can take negative energy and transmute it into positive energy. I recently made an example of this say somebody upsets you and you go and have a extra hard workout and you're taking the anger out on the weights, and in return you have a good workout and you grow your muscles instead of getting yourself in trouble and having a fight with somebody. Those are different ways that you can transmute energy. But this is absolutely tied back to Nikola Tesla and the Tesla Tower, because the way the human body works is almost identical. The pineal gland, in many ways, looks just like a Tesla coil, and it is releasing energy into the 12 cranial nerves, which takes me back to the 12 zodiac signs. And once you learn what all the zodiac signs mean by definition, and then you start to look at the 12 houses, then you can start to build a picture and internally reflect to yourself, what do these different things mean to me? And that's probably one of the biggest things about self-discernment, is to not always take what somebody else's opinion is, but to take your own internal understanding and start to work with it within your own imagination. Because you have the divine blueprint in your DNA. And speaking of DNA, again, we are so intertwined with things, because now you're seeing the DNA right here. And if you take DNA and you turn it the long way and you look down DNA the long way, you get this. I find all this stuff very interesting, and I'm very glad that somebody asked for this video. And I might do something, a little bit deeper, a little bit more well planned out in the future if, if there's enough demand in the comment section for it. But for me, doing affirmations was really helpful because as I was starting to learn to discern these things for myself, it was highlighting to me things that I needed to change in my life. Because there were some things that would be like in a repeating fashion that were not healthy. They were not beneficial to my life. And so making the adjustments for those things to leave my life meant that I had room for new things to come in, for me to attract new things into my life. And that was probably one of the most helpful things that I learned throughout this whole journey. How many times in life have you doubted something only to manifest the outcome that matches that doubt? Or when you knew something beyond a shadow of a doubt, you didn't second guess, you did it. And the result showed that you believed in yourself through the actions that you took. So there is a layer of steps or sequences that happen, right? First, we have a thought. Then there is either a knowing or a belief or either a doubt, followed by an action. The action will reveal what the root cause was, right? So we may know vaguely what a tree is until we have what? Seen what fruit it has bared. Because in seed format, you could mix it up with a whole bunch of other seeds that look the same, and you wouldn't be able to tell what kind of fruit it might bear. And as it's growing, you might say, oh, it could be apple tree. But what species of apple is it going to be? You don't know that until it actually bears the fruit. And once it bears the fruit, then you understand the roots. You understand everything about that tree. And that is really how human actions work, human behaviors. What is the root cause of something? What is the pathway of thought, actions, and beliefs and knowing that manifested this action? So again, signs always follow. What was I thinking? Well, I don't know what I was thinking, but I know what I did, right? So once you start to understand some of these things on a fundamental level, it sharpens your own intuition, because if you are on the outside of something and you are faced with someone, right, they may tell you something, but their actions show you something else. So again, it's almost mystical. It's almost supernatural, because you don't have to tell that person you know what they were thinking. Even though their words don't match their actions, if you can see what they did and you witness their actions, then you understand the root cause. You understand the intention. You understand the motivation that caused that person to take that action. Perhaps they were too embarrassed to admit the truth. Perhaps there were many different reasons why somebody would be in a situations where their words don't match their actions. And it also helps you in your own life to be able to be more in alignment with yourself. Once I started to understand and distinguish some of this stuff, I made a lot of changes in myself, because I want to know that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And that led me through the whole self-talk journey, where I started to understand that there were certain words in my self-talk that I needed to change. I was one of them, because was is a past tense word. I was going to do this. Why haven't you yet? Well, I was going to get around to it. Do you see right there? If you change the was to will, I will do this. I am going to take this action. I believe in myself, and I know firsthand. I know myself, to know thyself, right? That is the serendipity mysteries of life. But as you can see here, we have the star that is represented again. We have two circles, and then we have a blending of the two. One is theory, one is practice. The serendipity mysteries. Man, know thyself, and thou shalt know all. This gives us the layout. And as I showed you earlier, the different aspects of the nervous system, red and blue. Well, what do you see up here? You see a blue star, a red star, and in the center, a green star. That takes us back to the heart chakra because the heart is the way. Jesus said, I am the way, and only through my Father can you get to heaven. Well, in a child's mind, you have to go through Jesus, right? But the truth of the matter is, if the Father is the mind, right? Through the heart into heaven, through the vertebrates, the 33 vertebrates, up into the dome, right? If we open the head and turn the skull upside down, it looks like a bowl. It looks like a dome. So the consciousness of all 12 of those cranial nerves, the reincarnation of life, the 12 cranial nerves, the 12 zodiac signs, the 12 disciples, the 12 houses in astrology. 12 times 12 is what, 144? I could be wrong, or maybe that's 72 and 72. But again, numbers are absolute. This is the regeneration and unification with God. To know thyself. To know thyself, if you are created in the image of God, then to know thyself is to know God. It does not mean that you are God or that you can inhabit a God complex where you have the same equal power of God. No, you have the imagination to manifest on earth. So when I started to understand this, I had a talk with my child's mother about the essence of an earth angel. The essence, right? It is the state of being. The emotional state of being changes perception of thought. If, for example, I wanted to live like an earth angel, I wanted to act like an earth angel, then I would do kind acts for others because it brings me joy and I don't need recognition. I don't need anything in return. It makes me feel good to do something kind for another person. And that, my friends, takes you to one of the highest vibrations of all, and that is love. Love is the ultimate vibration. If you look at the thought frequencies, right? Here we go. Here's a good example. These are brain waves. If you were on a boat and these brain waves represented water, which one would be the most peaceful to travel across at high speed? Gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Delta is one of the slowest waves, and that's why you have this slow peak and fall. Again, sine waves, guys. The tighter the wave, the tighter between the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys, the faster you go across. And when you think about frequency and you think about levitation, frequency, how frequent something is happening. You think about domes and you think about old churches and old cathedrals. They had these great big domes where the sound would go up in there and resonate and it would just vibrate all around. So vibration, frequency, energy. 3, 6, and 9, the key to the universe is the state of being, the feeling, the internal feeling. Neville Goddard often says the feeling is secret. So you would think that an earth angel would have that little smirk on their face, that they have this grand secret to the whole world that they're just keeping to themselves. They're not telling anyone, but they have a secret. And so guys, as you can see, I also wear a cadeus, however you want to say it. It was representative of the two halves of the nervous system. And when you think about it, each half of the brain is a mirror image of the other half, but it is in opposition. It is opposite. So you have logic and you have emotion, or the creative side. And the door, as we have been told many times, is to the right. So the analytical, the logical side of the mind is like a book. It is black and white. It is absolute, yes or no, up or down. But then the creative side sometimes doesn't have structure. It can be a wide range of vivid colors and vivid things, but it needs structure. So there has to be a bridging, a coming together of logic and creation to form something cohesive. And when we turn to a more balanced state of being, we start to open our wings. We start to spread and expand our consciousness. That is the wings opening up. If you take the brain and flip it over upside down and open it like this, you get wings. That, my friends, is very interesting. There's so much symbolism, guys. I barely even scratched the surface with this video, and I've already gone quite some time in it. So if you like this kind of stuff and you want some more of it, I would be happy to make some more. You just got to let me know in the comment section what you're thinking, what you like, what you may have questions on, or would like for me to go further into. But yes, you can totally get signs from the universe. You can totally catch synchronistic events. And repeating numbers, yes, 3, 6, and 9. The 3, 6, and 9 of Nikola Tesla, the I am. And I know I said I was going to leave you on one last image, but I was wrong. I'm going to leave you on this one. I will see you guys down the road.